All right, so I'm going to open the floor today and ask if there are any questions about anything, about the assignment, about the project. How are things going? Does anybody have anything? Okay, silence is golden, right? All right, so let me share my screen with you here. Well, before I do that, give you the introduction. So today I'm going to touch a little bit more upon how we look, because on Tuesday we had, oh my gosh, what did we discuss on Tuesday? My notes just disappeared. I apologize. Let me collect my thoughts. All right, the functions of emotion. So we talked about emotions and how children form that, and it's really in an environmental thing that we have a predisposition to learn how to start expressing emotions and how to even develop our language, right? But it really depends heavily upon the environment in which they're in as to how they receive those emotions and how they practice them. Kind of like what we talked about with play therapy, right? They have to have learning moments. They have to know that smiling gives them positive reward, or crying also gives them positive reward, right? So there's really a lot of that operant learning that's occurring with that. So today we're going to take a little bit more of a biological view to it when we talk about temperament. Okay, so temperament's a little bit different because it's something that we can really trace to more hereditary reasons. Okay, so temperament is something that we learn about and continue to learn about in terms of really understanding child's approach to life, and really temperament cannot be changed. What we see in temperament as children usually, again, not in all cases, usually is about the same temperament that we see later in life. So we're born with the fixed temperament. Okay, now that's going to be a little bit different because we're also going to be talking about attachment styles. And I find that a lot of students tend to kind of bleed a lot of this terminology and these ideas over with one another, especially since they're in the same chapter. But so anyway, just be aware that we're usually born with a fixed temperament, okay? And what we as caregivers and educators and parents can do is help the kiddos to really actually manage and understand what their temperament is and really understand ours, or help the parents, if we're the educator or therapist, help the parent understand theirs. And there are a couple surveys, and if we have time today, I'll show you what one of those questionnaires look like. But based on the child's age, we can determine basically how much they run around, how much they tend to sleep, are they more responsive, and based on that survey, we can match that up with the parent's temperament to see what kind of parenting shifts that we have to do, if has to be some kind of intervention, right? So really, let me switch my screen back so you can see what I am doing. All right. Hopefully you can all see this. All right. So what is temperament? So temperament, put simply, it's defined as the individual differences in self-regulation and reactivity that's biologically based, and it really tends to be stable. So they're really individual differences in self-regulation. And the other part you really need to know about this is it's stable over a lifespan. Okay. All right. So a couple other terms that your book kind of talked about here, and I'm just going to gloss over here quickly, is reactivity. So you might have seen what reactivity is. And all reactivity is when we're looking at temperaments, is how excitable, like how excitable is the response system based on the stimulus. So I give you how excitable and I'm going to put ANS, okay, autonomic nervous system, okay, because we look at autonomic nervous system, especially the sympathetic nervous system, when we experience fear. Fear is probably one of our most observable emotions that we can see in a person, because it physiologically does a lot with the body. Happiness, a little harder to do. I mean, unless we have some kind of biofeedback and we see somebody's heart rate going down. But generally, we can see reactivity in fear and anger, because it starts, we see their muscles tense up. We can usually see them breathing heavy or sighing, or they might get a scowl on their face. So anyway, we really look at fear as a great observable emotion, right? So reactivity is just that. So say we have two children, one is more excitable, more reactive than the other, and we have a loud noise that plays. One child might react very almost violently to that, where they're going to run and seek, and that noise is going to be unpleasant, where the other child, who isn't very highly reactive, might be a little bit more curious and not as easily startled by that. So that's really what reactivity is. You're going to hear self-regulation, the word self-regulation. It's part of the definition of temperament, right? So when we look at self-regulation, we're looking at their ability to control reactions. All right. And again, I'm going to illustrate these as I break down some of these temperaments. All right. So the differences in temperament, they really can include the difference in emotional regulation, their ability to manage their emotions, their biological function. It could be a difference in regulation of motor activity or attention span, right? Now we see that. We see some children may be able to focus better than others on certain tasks, right? So that could be a difference in temperament. Rhythmicity, or really how they're able to sleep. Like, are they able to get on a regular sleep schedule? That's important to really discover or be able to observe with temperament. Or how predictable it is when they are approached with a new stimulant. Are they more curious about it, or are they going to be more standoffish about it? And again, I think I have a video. I actually don't have a video for temperament. I have one for attachment styles, which I'll show you here in just a little bit. All right. So let's imagine that we have 3 children, or 3 babies. Okay. We're going to have we'll say child number 1, child number 2, and child number 3. All right. So we'll say we have child number 1 here. Okay, we'll give him a smiley face. I would draw a baby, but I'm not very good at drawing, so I'm not. Maybe little stick figures, maybe a little rattle there or something, or a lollipop. I don't know. Okay, so child number 1, is that a good child? Does that look like a child? All right, we're going with it. So anyway, we could say that this a baby with child 1, they're very cheerful. They're really relaxed. They're fairly predictable in their sleeping pattern. So they're feeding normally without any kind of fits or difficulties there. We're going to categorize this baby as easy. Okay. And again, we're looking at rhythmicity, or I'll write this down because rhythmicity. I'm not sure. Was rhythmicity, any of you that looked in the book, was rhythmicity in there? Anyway, rhythmicity is sleep pattern. So good rhythmicity is what we're looking for, good sleep patterns. that defines the easy child, okay? Child number one. They also, we almost see their high adaptability. They change and they really have mild, intense moods, most of which are usually positive, okay? So we're gonna see more positive moods. And we're going to see, what was the other one I said? Adaptability, okay? So if things change in their environment, adaptability. So if things change in their environment, say they have a new person in their life, or they change the furniture, the parents change the furniture, or something just changes, they're going to adapt a lot easier to that than some of these other children I'm going to describe here, okay? We usually see easy children make up about 40% of the population. So not quite a majority, but a good amount of them, okay? So ones that are really defined as easy. Now you're going to have a mix, which I'll explain here in a little bit, but for the most part, they're about 40%. All right. So now we have this baby in the middle. Okay. And we'll say this child, we're going to give this child a sad face, maybe even a tear. Okay. And so this child, we gave them a sad face. And maybe this baby is really, really irritable or intense or less predictable in sleep pattern, right? So sleep pattern is, well, I'll write that here in a minute. And feeding might be problematic for the child. They may be a little bit pickier with their foods or not want to eat at certain times when they should be hungry. We might characterize this baby as being difficult. And again, we're going to see decrease in sleep patterns or rhythmicity. We're going to see more negative moods. And we're going to see higher reactivity to changes. All right. So children that are really withdrawn, they're inhibited to new situations. They have slow adaptability to change. They have irregular biological functions sometimes. Okay, so even going to the bathroom, like potty training them might be problematic later on in life, right? They often have intense negative moods, which we talked about. These children make up about 12% of the population. All right. All right, I'm going to move child 3 down a little bit because I need a little bit more room, I think. All right, so let's look at child number 3, okay? And child number 3 is, maybe we're going to give them kind of a flat face, like not smiling, not sad, kind of just a flat affect, if you will, all right? Maybe we can't really tell if this child is smiling or if they're frowning, okay? Maybe this girl or boy, they're kind of resistant to change. They're withdrawn from new people or new scenarios. We might even characterize his or her affect or disposition as being withdrawn, relatively inactive compared to the previous 2 groups that we saw here, okay? They have mild intensity, you know, it might vary, but it might be easygoing. It might shift to high reactivity to a new stimuli that they have. We call these children here, let's see here. So these children are really going to be not difficult, not easy, but disoriented. All right. So I'm just going to kind of put a wave because they're just all over the place with their temperament. Okay. So anyway, there are other ways that we can also differentiate between some of these children, but we call these differentiations in temperament. And temperament is really a broad term. It's actually quite difficult to, as you can see, just pigeonhole each one of these kids. All right, because what really sets the scale between difficult and easy? Because a child might appear easy for one parent or one caregiver or in one setting, but in another one they might seem very, very difficult. And that's what we as professionals look in the field to see, well, what is the matching style here? What are the parents doing that might be leading that child to be a little bit difficult in that situation, right? All right, so anyway, so that's really it between the temperaments here. Trying to look through to see if there's anything I want to touch upon. Let's see. All right. All right. So just really quickly, I do want to just make a quick mention of the origins of temperament. Like I said, sometimes we can look at the parenting style or the environment, but it's really debated between the classic, you remember the nature versus nurture, nurture consisting of research reports and twin studies that these traits are said to be biological in origin, and they are passed on hereditary, right? Or by nurture, or by, yeah, not by nature, not nurture. Nurture, on the other hand, consists of influences of the prenatal environment, such as exposure to stress or teratogens, right? We talked about that a little earlier. If the baby was born premature, that could also really determine what temperament could be. All right. Also, the style of parenting and caregiving influences their temperament, which would be more on the nurture side. Additionally, cultural background of the parents also influences the way of emotions and what's expressed. What would culture? What do you think culture has to do with temperament?
Whether or not you display or how you display your emotions.
Okay, going back to what we talked about on Tuesday, right? In Asian cultures, they're less likely to explore or to display emotions in certain settings, certain situations, right? Because they're more collectivists, and that could be for different reasons. Like for example, if a child got a poor results or did not win a contest in an Asian culture, most Asian cultures, they're going to be less likely to show excitedness and happiness I'm sorry, if they did win something, because they're more of a collectivist culture. So if their group does well or their class does well, that kind of triggers a happy response. So absolutely, culture has a lot to do with what is the observable temperament. Okay. So again, temperament is really different for all children. And as a educator or a caregiver or a therapist, what you want to do is try and learn about the child's temperament. You know, where would you sort of put that child to be most dominant in terms of temperament? Reactive, or a caregiver that is highly reactive to stress. How is that going to be taught to children? And I just got a message saying my internet is unstable. Am I still coming through?
Yeah, you are now.
Okay, I must have stalled or something. All right.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's really all I have about temperament. Any questions, or does anybody have anything to add?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
So when you're talking about temperament being stable, does that mean, so like people who have like anger management issues and they go to therapy for their anger management, are we just teaching them ways to deal with that anger and they're always going to have those type of anger issues? Or are we able to actually change them reacting so quickly?
I can say with a degree of certainty, because I used to run anger management courses when I was in the military, is that it can be redirected, and really they may have a higher reactivity to stress, that could be very true, but they also have a lot of controls that they can do. And I've seen some people that were just the worst when it came to reactivity, and had some kind of history of violence in their past, or them perpetuating violence. I have seen them, they are able to turn that around, and kind of break that up. So what happens during anger? We saw the video with the child in the tantrum on Tuesday. That's really all anger is. When somebody has anger management issues, they're expressing anger similar to what a tantrum would look like. They're reactive. They get boiled up easily. They get that fight or flight, and they start acting on that, given one singular point that they deem is important for them to start acting on that, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's say for example, I'm out walking on the street, and somebody rounds the corner with their car, and this is actually a true story, and almost hits me. There are two ways that I can really do that. Well, actually, three ways. There are three ways that I can react to that. I acknowledge that was a scary moment for me, and I think about it, and I try to either talk to that person or do something constructive. I can let it not bother me and walk away from that, and harbor that, and that could be problematic down the road. Or I can act up in violence and shout at the person and flip them the bird. Okay, luckily that's not what I did. I was able to. It did frighten me. It kind of upset me that the person was going so fast. And I did say something to them about slowing down, but that was the extent of it. Trust me, I wanted to do a whole lot more, but that takes practice. And for some people it might be easier, some people might be harder, but the recipe is the same. Breaking up that point that would normally get somebody upset, like a conversation or an argument with a spouse or with a parent or even with a child, right? And knowing what your triggers are and saying, well, when I feel defensive, I start to scrunch up my neck. I start to breathe a little shallower, or my heart rate goes up, or I start sweating, or my fist ball up, or something like that. Being able to recognize the signs before they actually act. And when they are able to get in that practice, they can start putting things into place to remedy that, either walking away or thinking about what they're going to say before they say it. So anger management, I always share with my classes that a lot of people get it wrong. They send them to anger management to control their anger. What's wrong with that statement? Why is controlling your anger unrealistic?
You can't necessarily control yourself getting angry. You're going to get angry.
No, it's unrealistic. And anybody that tries to control their anger, they're really going to be spinning their wheels. They're not going to be effective in doing so. Okay, and that's because you can't control your emotions. We feel what we feel because that's hardwired into us. Our 6 basic emotions are hardwired into us, and we can't stop feeling them. What we can do is what?
Learn how to manage them.
React to it different, right?
Yeah.
Learn how to react, and it takes practice. It's not easy. So, did that answer your question?
So yeah, basically what I'm taking away from this is that temperament is basically stable over time. And if you have like a quick reactivity like that, it would stay that way unless you were to seek out some type of management.
Yeah.
Like help. Okay.
I mean, and it's possible. I'm not going to say, so if the person is able to learn, if they're quick to adapt to, like they're able to put things together, they might be able to learn things on their own. And that's just through operant conditioning. What are the consequences to this? Did I have an unfavorable outcome from saying this thing to this person in this situation? If so, if they can piece that together, they're not going to do that again. Now, the problem is with tantrums is what? When they throw a tantrum, people tend to give them what they want. So now they're reinforced to perpetuating that bad behavior as adults, which is a problem, right? We can't be doing that as adults. All right. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. All right. So those are temperaments. So now what I want to go through with you, and I'm going to share a video. So we're going to look at attachment styles now, okay? Because attachment styles are very, very important, and they really feed in with temperament, because if you have a highly reactive parent and a highly reactive child, there might be some problems. There might be some overlap there where that child is not going to react to the parent and vice versa. And that could affect attachment. And above everything, we want to have a good, solid attachment style. So I'll share, oops, I got to share my screen with you first. All right.
This experiment, which I watched through a two-way mirror, is designed to gauge how secure is the crucial relationship between mother and child.
Okay, this bunny is going to go here, and that bunny will be on top.
The value of the test has been established in studies that would watch a child, 1-year-old, and then follow it up and interview them about the relationships to their parents when they were 21 years old. So we're quite confident in the long-term significance of this relationship.
Peter, that's Peter.
After several minutes' play, the mother is signaled to leave the room.
Sweetie, I'll be back in 1 minute, okay? I'll get you back in 1 minute.
Devastating for you. Shame, I feel. But she'll survive. The key moment in the experiment is the child's reaction to her mother's return.
Hi. Hi, honey. It's okay.
The important clue is whether the baby's able to become calmed down by the contact with the mother, get back to play. Sometimes it takes a couple of minutes. But you see, when the mother was out, she was only interested in the mother, no interest in the toys. Now she has a contact with the mother. She's beginning to show a little interest in the environment, and shortly she'll be right back with the toys where we started.
So you would call this a secure one?
Yes, yes.
She's certainly much happier.
Goes to the door following her. Now, we sent the mother right back in, but the point here is not to distress the baby. We're just trying to challenge it. The baby puts her hands to her face in a sad expression, puts her face down. When she picks her up, she keeps her head down, her arms out, and then she sits in the chair holding the baby. The baby's still sullen. He's low-keyed.
So you would call this insecure
Yes,
attachment?
insecure. He's avoidant. He's not engaging her, and it's not the reunion's not effective. And it's important to remember here that the thing that upset him was her absence. Her return should be the solution to his problem. Now this is another pattern that we see in babies who are not good at using their mother as a secure base at home. This baby is also insecure. But you'll see, we get a look at his play before the separation. The mother's left, and when she returns, she picks him up. He can't calm down. He's still upset. She offers a toy to amuse him or to comfort him or to distract him, and he slaps it away. She offers another. He slaps it away. He's angry. We call these babies resistant or ambivalent because they both want her back and yet can't use the contact. We think that the difficulty is that in the past, when he sought comfort, she's been inconsistent as to whether she's available and responsive or not.
Okay, so I just wanted to set the stage for the other type of what else we're going to talk about today with attachment styles. But before we do that, I want to go back to my slide here and share something with you. So I apologize. So I got one of the terminologies incorrect as I was looking over it. It's not disoriented. So for those of you that are keeping notes, if you want to make a quick change to that note, bear with me. There we go. So the third style that we described with the varying adaptability is, it's called slow, to warm, or slow to warm up. Oops, slow to warm up style. Okay, and there are varying styles. They're probably around anywhere, depending on the theory. They're about 4 to 9, I think, is the most I've seen. And this one only has about 8%, by the way. So that leaves a pretty varying. That's only 50% of the population. And then the other theories really mix up some of the terminology, and they have different levels throughout. So anyway, these are really the 3 big ones that we're going to teach in this course. All right. So on to attachment styles. All right. So I'm going to kind of teach this in a way that you can maybe relate to this, because we were all at once babies, right? And we all have different aspects of our life that make us feel successful. Some of us may not feel successful in other areas. So I'm going to kind of relate this to us as adults and how we attach to things. So maybe that'll give you some insight as to how the children in the video grew up to be, right? Depending on their temperament and how they learn to attach. So think about it in terms, I mean, have you ever caught yourself doing something like having maybe a panic attack when you're asked to speak in front of others? How many people have had a panic attack speaking in front of others? All right,
Yep.
raising your hand. Okay. All right, so a couple of you chiming in there. You know, I have, you know, I believe it or not, in high school I had passed out twice giving a book report. So and now I stand up in front of 125 students sometimes talking. So you know, it took a lot for me to get over that, but it was something I could learn. So anyway, maybe if you think about it in other terms, maybe you need to be the center of attention, right? All the time, right? Some people need that. They want to be the center of attention, or they want to stay out of attention. And you may ask yourself, why do I do that, right? Well, part of the answer is how you bonded with your caregivers or your parents during childhood. The way that you were raised, where you're raised in your relationship with your family shapes a large part of who you will become as an adult. If childhood really affects you in some weird ways that we know, right? Because it creates us as people. We develop through our childhood and sets us up for successes or failures even, or setbacks later on in life. So one of the ways that childhood really molds you to be the person you are is the development of your attachment style. Okay, and we see that in relationships. We see that as parents when we become parents ourselves. Or even coworkers, right? It could affect us professionally. And we're going to talk about the 4 attachment styles, as well as how you can spot them either at work or at school or in relationships, or even in crisis in some chances, right? Now, you all remember Harlow's monkey, right? I think we showed that earlier in the semester about the monkey that was let out of its cage and fed off of the warm snuggled with the warm mom and fed off of the wire one. Do you remember that? Did I play that for you?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So so thanks to the research, that was Harry Harlow and John Bowlby, and they really contributed to the mental health community and by using that as an example to show us attachment style. And it really described the ways that we interact with and attach to others throughout our lives, as you might have guessed, or as you're probably doing now. So you develop your attachment style as an infant. Okay. It's first formed by the way you bond with your caregivers, and it continues to shape through your childhood. Okay, so continues throughout life. So understanding our attachment style is really kind of a big deal, because if attachment style is problematic, it could hinder learning. It could hinder proper child rearing or child development, right? So there are a lot of things, negative implications that are associated with not having secure, not having proper attachment styles. Okay, so in 1970, a psychologist named Mary Ainsworth, who is listed in your book, wanted to know more about how children with different temperaments attach to their parents and what this says about how they relate to the rest of the world. And what they did, as you saw in that video, that was an example of Mary Ainsworth's experiment. And they would get separated. They would show separation anxiety when they are away from their mom, or they settle into an environment just fine. This really looks at both of those, right? And her research showed us that we really form attachments in one of four ways. So our first one that we're going to describe is, and I'm going to kind of jump around a little bit, but this is secure or type B. All right, so within secure, people with, we see people with more confidence, all right? Their needs are met and they're usually most likely to assert themselves and ask for help, okay? So that's 2, and I'm gonna go through and kind of explain these a little bit later. Or I'm sorry, that's type B. So 2 is insecure. Or avoidant. And we're going to call this one type A. All right. So people with this type of attachment style tend to appear more withdrawn and independent. They don't really believe others will meet their needs, and rarely they'll ask for help. Okay. So the third type that we'll describe is ambivalent. Or resistant. And we'll call this one type C. All right, and people in this attachment style, they can be difficult to read because they alternate between being super clingy and also rejecting others. So they're often insecure and seem to have trouble exploring new situations, right? So, and then we're going to look at type, or the fourth one, which is disorganized. We don't necessarily, you can call it type D or type E if you want. I've seen it both ways, but I'm just going to put disorganized. So this is our disorganized type. People with this type of attachment style view all interactions with others as if there's a chance to solve old traumatic situations from their past, if that makes sense. So they may have had a bad experience and they're reliving that constantly. And they tend to have a hard time breaking out of that cycle. So they tend to suffer from depression and anxiety. We see that over time, and usually some kind of PTSD, symptoms of PTSD. Maybe not diagnosed, but it might look that way. These are really disorganized attachment styles, and they're more likely than the other 3 styles to use negative coping strategies, and we might see more drug interaction or drug addiction or alcohol, or starting problems to really disconnect from painful situations. All right, so that's really it, the 4 styles. Now I'm going to go through these one by one and explain them a little bit better. So if how many of you how many of you care to share what your attachment style is, what you think it is?
Wait, quick question.
Yeah.
For disorganized, would that just be type D then?
You can put, I've actually seen type D, type E. I'm just going to put disorganized. I'm not going to put a type there because it really varies. Okay, it's disorganized. That's all you really need to know.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, I would just list it as disorganized as to eliminate any kind of confusion, because we're later actually, yeah, we're going to talk about personality types here later. And this kind of talks about personality types, but I don't want to kind of blend this too much into that, because that might get confusing. Because we'll have personality types A, personality type B personality, and even some theories have type C personality. So really don't get those two mixed up. The secure attachment style, all right? If you think about people that you know or children that you know, this might be a style, people that you see at work or children that you see, they're going to have an attachment style that's typically focused on good communicators. They're good communicators. They can relate to people well. They're the least likely to be involved in any kind of gossip or drama, right? But mostly they're likely to ask questions at meetings or sit in the front of the class. Relationships with people in secure attachment styles are most likely to they're most likely to make the first move, and they're least likely to play any kind of head games. They tend to have healthy boundaries, and they're usually respectful of others' boundaries in crises, especially. Although they don't really enjoy drama or crisis. They're really able to manage their emotions and see big picture when problems happen. They keep their cool enough to tolerate differences of opinion, and they really help to smooth things over with other people's feelings. Okay, so the second type was the insecure type, or type A, or avoidant. People that display this type of the insecure avoidant attachment style are probably having difficulty in making friends. Okay, you'll see this with children. They might be loners. They might get aggressive or shy away and not want to play with anybody. They're probably seen as a loner at work or school. They tend to be more focused on what it is they're doing themselves, rather than being sociable and part of other group projects. In relationships and friendships, you'll see children or people like this. They're going to be more insecure. They may have problems that they talk about frequently, like negative. They identify how they're feeling and tend to be happier talking more about themselves and intellectual topics than really anything else outside of them. Okay, so people with an insecure avoidant attachment style, they're more likely to be the friend who tells you nothing's wrong and then explodes in anger. So we see that a lot. Okay, so similar to what you saw in that video, right? Nothing's really wrong until something boils up and they go loco on you, right? A person in crisis with this type of personality attachment style, they might go out of their way to avoid super emotional situations. They'll shy away from those things. It's too much for them, and they're really able to use their more objective nature and take charge in situations. So there might be some benefits to having that insecurity, but they're definitely not the clingy type, or they might be, but in an insecure way. If that makes sense.
I have a question. Could those be like manipulative people, or like no?
Could be. You mean like later on in life, do they manipulate?
Mm-hmm.
It could be, and reason being is usually with the insecure, they're more focused inward. They're more focused on themselves. We don't necessarily see a lot of I would say there's some manipulation, but not to the level where they don't care about anybody else. It's not like there's a lack of remorse. They're just more focused inward, and they're avoidant of social situations. And they tend to be, going back to temperament, probably a little bit more reactive in insecure or difficult relationship environments. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yep, and I'll talk about like manipulation is really disorganized. It gets a little bit more into disorganized, and I'll explain that here in a little bit. So the third type that we talked about was the ambivalent or resistant type, or the type C. So at school, these are going to be the classmates who are always preoccupied, and they're anxious. And people with this type of attachment style, they tend to be more sensitive about their work, and they need more reassurances than other attachment styles. Okay, so if you can just imagine like that, it almost looks like they're secure, but it's almost to the point where it's unhealthy because they constantly need reassurances. They tend to be less independent. Okay, so relationships for people in these attachment styles, they're labeled way too sensitive because they react strongly, and this goes back to temperament. They react strongly to anything that seems like they're being rejected, maybe. Okay, so this may cause a person with type C to be more clingy or attempt to reject you before you reject them. All right. They also tend to blame others for relationship issues. You see that a lot. I see that a lot in practice where nobody's ever wrong in a relationship. If any of you that are getting into any kind of family therapy or couples counseling, nobody's ever wrong. They come there, everybody is right in their own way. And yeah, that's fun to try and not necessarily, I don't want to say tear apart, but kind of get them to realize that somebody has to give somewhere, and usually it's both of them. It's not just one or the other. So anyway, because of their anxiety, people with type C, they're in the habit of personalizing others' behaviors, and that's they're insecure and they're ambivalent with their style, with how they interact with people. Okay. All right. So the last one that we listed was disorganized. Okay, so at school, you'll see children that might be acting out and doing things like pulling the fire alarms, right? Just to get people to react to people, like you were talking about, manipulation. They're breaking the rules constantly. People with disorganized attachment styles, they love to test boundaries, right? So you might see kids in class. If you're an educator, you might see children with disorganized attachment style. They might be the person that's charismatic, but they most likely want to engage in mean behavior. They want to take advantage of people most often because it's fun for them sometimes. Relationships can be just outright challenging for people with this type of attachment styles. Okay, again, because as you pointed out, manipulation, right? That's a factor that doesn't bode well in relationships, right? They could be aggressive, and they could also be abusive in those relationships against loved ones. So they often feel that like they're replacing those that hurt them in the past. So we're kind of seeing that re-traumatization again. They're getting they're seeking their revenge on somebody that might have hurt them in the past, right? Any kind of negativity in the past or whatever, or maybe somebody had abused them. That could trigger some kind of exacting revenge on somebody, right? So anyway, those are really the 4 attachment styles. I know I kind of breezed through them, but I wanted to get these in before we're wrapping up our discussion and going into next week's topic. All right, so any questions on temperament or attachment styles? Did I do a pretty good job explaining what the differences were between them? I didn't lose anybody.
Yes, you did a great job.
Okay, thank you, Amber. All right, any questions on anything? Okay, all right. Well, if nothing,
So
go ahead.
for the assignment, we just gotta ask our mom or somebody how we acted when we was younger.
Yeah, yes. So yeah, just ask anybody that knew you as a child, what some of those questions are, and that kind of gives you an idea of what temperament you had and what attachment styles you had and all those good things. So yeah, it's kind of I like doing this because I think some people find it very insightful as to where they think they are and where somebody else's appraisal of who they are is. And hopefully it doesn't bring up anything crazy or painful. Usually I haven't had anybody tell me that they need counseling or anything after doing this assignment. So I guess that's a good thing.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any other questions? All right.
Well,
So if